Welcome to Jerry Recaps. The story continues. The stage has been acknowledged as a test by the tower. The penalty surrounding Jaryong was now lighter. It was as good as having no penalty. So he's probably around the 30th floor in strength. To defeat a player of this caliber in an unplanned test, this was fairly high in difficulty. So how hard is the actual test? YuWon had heard over and over that the cult's test was difficult, but this was the first time he would experience it in person. It seemed that the news that YuWon passed the first test had already spread throughout the demonic cult. Though that should have been pretty obvious to YuWon. This many martial artists and the four lords wouldn't have gathered over someone who wanted to take the test with no qualifications whatsoever. YuWon guessed that this gathering was ordered by the heavenly demon. Jaryong had his black sword ready, aiming it at YuWon. "Did you say your name is Kim YuWon?" asked Jaryong. YuWon nodded his head as he answered, "What about it? I heard you passed the first test." "That means that the heavenly demon has acknowledged you," said Jaryong. He further said, "I don't know what made the heavenly demon acknowledge you and give you a pass, but seeing as how you are ranting on it, I assume you weren't acknowledged." YuWon cut him off. He was going on too long, but he didn't care to listen to him any further. Unlike me. As the last player to attempt the cult's test, Jaryong was quite proud of that fact, despite still not having accepted having failed without even getting to properly take the test. Jaryong ground his teeth. YuWon had hit the nail on the head with his words, and sometimes the truth hurt the most. Unable to hold back his anger, Jaryong charged in. Jaryong's black martial uniform fluttered as he swung his sword. He was going mad after YuWon's provocations. His movements were quick, but despite the sudden attack, YuWon leisurely turned his body to dodge Jaryong's sword. "You bastard," Jaryong called as YuWon dodged his sword. He readied for the next attack. YuWon just stared at him fearlessly. As a previous high ranker, he knew how to provoke his opponents and take their guard down. After the first swing, Jaryong swung the sword multiple times, but YuWon was able to dodge all of it too easily. He got quite angry as not even a single strike was able to hit YuWon. "That's right. I wasn't acknowledged by the heavenly demon." His sword was fast and had weight behind it. On the edge of his blade, there was a type of mana called ki in the martial realm, which increased the deadliness of his attacks. I, who had sworn eternal loyalty to the heavenly demonic cult, I dedicated my life to passing this test, Jaryong shouted while fighting YuWon. He kept on babbling. "From when I was young, I waited to become a player, strengthening my body, and practicing martial arts. And when I made it back to the martial realm, I challenged the test. So why?" Jaryong must have exerted his power to the limit, causing the penalty to start sparking. Instead of striking back, YuWon just dodged his sword. How did an outsider like you get acknowledged? Why? Why couldn't I be? He kept on shouting and swinging his sword at YuWon. "You're like a kid. Stop whining." YuWon spoke, finally unable to bear Jaryong mumbling. YuWon put the blade back into the scabbard and held the scabbard. YuWon's scabbard blocked Jaryong's blade. Then Jaryong's sword, which had seemed like it was going to slice YuWon in half, slipped sideways after losing balance. "You want to know why?" As YuWon these words, Jaryong was startled. He could a different sort of energy coming from YuWon, completely different from before. It was to the extent that he felt danger. "Your arm has been imbued with the power of a giant." The tower was notified. YuWon's arm became reinforced with the power of a giant. Partial gigantification will occur. The tower was notified. YuWon punched Jaryong in the back, knocking him down. Jaryong let out a cry in pain. After hitting the ground, Jaryong's body recoiled, twitching. After a bit, he tried to get back up, but his eyes were already halfway rolled back. Jaryong fell to the ground, his body going limp. YuWon said, "There's no special reason. It's because you were weak," as he looked down at the man passed out on the floor. Jaryong had already lost consciousness. And even though he wasn't lucid enough to hear it himself, with how many people in the hall heard YuWon's words, he was bound to hear about it soon enough. YuWon turned his head and looked over at the four lords, asking them, "Isn't that right?" The strongest and senior among all, the Sword Lord was stunned at YuWon's prowess. After a moment, he let out a smile. And then, the lords broke out in laughter. The Sword Lord, who had a silent and serious personality, only smiled, but the other three were having a ball. That is indeed true. It's been a while since I was so entertained. Even though a stage was created, if Jaryong wasn't penalized, that hypothesis is meaningless. He didn't even draw his sword. You have a point. The lords started chattering amongst themselves. The lords finished chatting after about 5 minutes. The first one to come to his senses was the Sword Lord. "You there! Bring out a crimson blood medicine ball," he ordered. Following the Sword Lord's order, a female servant who was on standby brought out a box containing the crimson blood medicine ball. The box was delivered to YuWon, and as soon as he took the box, he got a message. "You have passed the test. The tower notified. You have obtained a crimson blood medicine ball." YuWon opened up the box. Inside the box, there was a bright red ball the size of a thumbnail. The crimson blood medicine ball was now in YuWon's possession. "Though it isn't that great of an item, think of it as a present for entertaining these old men," said the Sword Lord. "Since I didn't really do much, I am more than satisfied with this gift." YuWon replied. "What did you just say?" The Fist Lord, the one who had the loudest personality amongst them, broke out into laughter once again. There were two meanings behind YuWon's words. Firstly, that he wasn't one bit nervous about the test against Jaryong. Secondly, that he didn't consider the elixir crimson blood medicine ball an all that amazing item. The reason why they put up the crimson blood medicine ball was because a reward of that level is required in order to decrease the restriction on Jaryong as much as possible. Despite that, YuWon had taken down Jaryong far too easily. The fight had ended much sooner than they had expected. But that's also why the four lords found the fight that much more entertaining. YuWon patiently let them go on. He guessed that since it had been a while since someone from outside had taken their test, he should let them enjoy it as much as possible. "I apologize for making you wait. Getting chatty naturally comes with old age." After saying it, the Sword Lord turned serious and asked, "Where did you learn martial arts?" "I don't know what school that move was from, but the way you deflected Jaryong's sword was quite impressive. I was simply imitating it," YuWon replied. "You were imitating it? Imitating, you say?" A large smile grew on the Sword Lord's face. He looked like he was about to burst out into laughter. "I shall now tell you the contents of the second test," said the Sword Lord. "The second test of the heavenly demonic cult will be with me, the Fist Lord, Pung Beklim." The Fist Lord. Among the four lords, he was the one with the most brazen personality. "Of course, we won't be having a normal duel. The objective is to endure 3 techniques against me, the Fist Lord." 3 techniques. On first impression, it didn't seem like that hard a test. But the opponent was a ranker. On top of that, it wasn't against a new greenhorn ranker like Chris's, but one of the leaders of the heavenly demonic cult. The Fist Lord raised 3 fingers. "I'll give you 3 months. 3 months wasn't a very long time, however, depending on how one used it, it also wasn't a short period of time. With the exception of elixirs, we'll provide you with every resource within the cult. The training facility, grain balls, clothes, and a comfortable place to rest. Whatever you desire, we can provide." YuWon shifted his attention from the Sword Lord to the Fist Lord. Though there wasn't much information about the heavenly demon, there was plenty known about the four lords. The First Lord, one of the greatest masters of hand-to-hand combat. He's a player that became a ranker by mastering martial arts. The Fist Lord is the weakest among the four lords. However, the power behind each of his strikes rivals the Sword Lord, who has the highest ranking. That was the gist of the information known about the Fist Lord in the martial realm. The penalty was a power that existed to prevent a player on a higher floor from indiscriminately using their power and destroying the ecosystem of the lower floors. However, in the case of a test recognized by the tower, the domain of the penalty was diluted depending on the test. Therefore, depending on the penalty, The power that the Fist Lord could use would be unpredictable. But if it's only 3 attacks. Seeing YuWon get lost in thought after hearing the contents of the test, the Fist Lord smirked. Of course, I also think that this is a nonsensical test. YuWon stopped the Fist Lord. No. That won't be necessary. Having finished thinking, YuWon shook his head. Instead of responding immediately, YuWon looked at his surroundings. Thanks to the fight against Jaryong, the martial artists of the cult were already far away from him. It was already an ideal setup, so he said, "Let's start right away." The stage had already been prepared. The hall became turbulent. Did you hear that? I did. He wants to start right away. He probably just doesn't know the Lord's true powers. He's an outsider who is unfamiliar with the cult, unlike the vice captain. The heavenly demonic cult's martial artists present in the hall were angry, disapproving, and baffled. They were all thinking the same thing: he must not know any better. Kim YuWon. Having heard the Spear Lord call his name, YuWon looked up at him. You might not know this, but the Fist Lord is a ranker. He's nothing like the passed-out vice captain over there. His voice sounded calm, but he appeared a bit angry. You seem to be looking down on our cult too much just because you managed to take down a vice captain. This was the reason why the Spear Lord was angry. He thought that YuWon was looking down on the heavenly demonic cult. As this was a natural misunderstanding, YuWon bowed and apologized. I'm sorry if it sounded like that. However, I promise that I am not looking down on the heavenly demonic cult. Then, as the Spear Lord was about to speak, a voice came from behind. That's enough, Spear Lord. The Fist Lord butted in between YuWon and the Spear Lord. The Fist Lord stood from his seat. When he stood up, he revealed that he was actually much taller and had a larger frame than it appeared while he was sitting down. He says it's a misunderstanding. We should just do as he wants then. Though that was what he said, it was as clear as day that his pride had been hurt. The energy around him enveloped his body. Instead of spreading outward, he looked as if he was about to dash towards YuWon at any moment and launch his fist. But right as the Fist Lord was about to take a step, "Fist Lord," said the Sword Lord, "stop." His words brought Pung Beklim to a halt. Do you expect me to just let it slide after hearing that? The Fist Lord retorted. Though there was a difference in skill between the 4 lords, they were all in equal standing. There was no need for one to listen to another. However, this is a test bestowed by the heavenly demon. It is different from the test that just took place. The Fist Lord's expression wavered ever so slightly. The heavenly demon. With the mention of his name, the Fist Lord had no choice but to back off. The heavenly demon's name carried absolute power within the heavenly demonic cult. The only one who can change the heavenly demon's test is the heavenly demon himself. 3 months' time. Do not disregard that, said the Sword Lord. The Fist Lord sat back down. The prideful Fist Lord of all people. That's how great the authority of the heavenly demon was. Though he had taken a seat, the Fist Lord was still glaring at YuWon. He appeared to be holding himself back with everything he had. Well then, I shall see you in 3 months, said Pung Beklim. But this did mean that YuWon wouldn't get what he wanted, no matter how much of a tantrum he threw. 3 months, huh? YuWon thought. In the end, he was given 3 months' time. He didn't particularly like it, but this wasn't something to be disappointed by. YuWon looked down at the sword at his waist. It won't be too bad. YuWon was treated as an important guest within the cult for taking the heavenly demon's test. But another reason why he was treated well was because he had demonstrated that he wasn't a run-of-the-mill player like the ones who attempted the test long ago. One could tell that was the case just by the number of martial artists that had gathered in the hall. As YuWon walked through, they started mumbling among themselves. Rumors about YuWon had already spread throughout the cult, which was why hundreds of martial artists had gathered to watch him. But still, thought YuWon. He looked at the old man walking in front of him. The Sword Lord, Shin Mugwek. He had personally taken on the task of guiding YuWon around. When the second-in-command of the heavenly demonic cult took on a task as lowly as being a guide, his subordinates all opposed the idea. However, this was the Sword Lord. There was no one on mount. Heaven who could bend his will except for the heavenly demon. Was this also an order from the heavenly demon? YuWon tried to suss out Mugwek's true intentions to see if the Sword Lord's interest in him was curiosity, goodwill, or hostility. No, it was not. Let's just say I am doing it for my own entertainment, said the Sword Lord. He continued, think of it as for my personal enjoyment. It has been a long time since I last met an outsider. And I have high expectations. Expectations? YuWon was confused. The Sword Lord clarified his intentions. How could I not have high hopes after seeing you in person? I believe that if it's you, you might actually pass the heavenly demon's test. So it's just simple curiosity. If that was the case, he'd be in the clear. YuWon hoped that Mugwek wouldn't become a variable in this test. But as long as it was just simple curiosity, YuWon thought it'd be okay. But Mugwek spoke as if he wanted YuWon to pass the test, which was likely the case. It was actually the same for most martial schools. They wanted someone to learn their martial arts, pass their test, receive acknowledgement, and climb the tower. However, this feels a bit different. There was nothing concrete to back this feeling up, but YuWon felt an odd sense of desperation in Mugwek's words just now. It was a feeling that was different from simply wanting someone to climb the tower and bring prosperity to the cult. With Mugwek showing him the way, YuWon finally arrived at his destination after a long walk. Mugwek turned around and finally asked the question that he'd been curious about for a while. So why this place? If you have something you need to prepare, wouldn't the weapons warehouse or even the martial arts library where we store our secret art be more appropriate? YuWon replied saying, I can skip the weapons warehouse. As for the martial arts library, I'll stop by there later. Are you saying that the medical house is even more important? YuWon started walking towards the medical house's door in response to his question. That's when Mugwek noticed that YuWon was smirking as he passed him. You said that the heavenly demonic cult will provide as much support as possible until the next test, right? Sword Lord replied that is indeed correct. As soon as YuWon had heard this proposition, he'd immediately thought of one thing. Those words. You're gonna regret them. As the medical house's door opened, the thick scent of medicinal herbs filled the air. All the doctors who worked in the medical house had just spent half the day bringing out medicinal ingredients from their storage per YuWon's request. It was a pile that weighed hundreds of kilograms at least. Just by looking at the amount, this was roughly half of all the medical ingredients that the medical house possessed. With the exceptions of medicine that counted as elixirs and the lowest grade medicinal ingredients, one could say that all the medicine of the medical house was gathered here. The chief doctor of the heavenly demonic cult's medical house, Hyun, was shocked by all the medicinal ingredients that YuWon gathered. Hyun was absolutely baffled, but he couldn't say a thing because of the heavenly demon's orders. With the exception of elixirs and the high-rank secret arts, spare no resources for him. He didn't know why the heavenly demon had given such an order. Why does he need this many medicinal ingredients? With this many ingredients, the demonic cult could have even declared war against the Martial Artists Alliance. So for a single person to use all this, especially in only 3 months, it made no sense. Naturally, the chief doctor thought YuWon's request was absurd. Thank you very much for all this. Without even looking a little bit sorry, YuWon started putting all the ingredients into his inventory. Just then the chief doctor spoke in a trembling voice to remind YuWon. He said, I'll say this again, but any medicinal ingredients you have remaining after 3 months have to be returned. And if an ingredient that you didn't use gets damaged, I have to reimburse it out of my own pocket. I'll make sure to remember it. At the time they were talking, YuWon finished putting all the ingredients into his inventory. It was a fairly expansive inventory. Not only was it large, but it also had a great ratio of weight reduction. Despite that, the inventory was almost crammed full. There was a shit ton. After emptying out the medical house, YuWon was guided by a female servant. He thought he could hear the chief doctor scream behind him, but YuWon decided to ignore it. In 3 months, he'll really be bawling his eyes out. YuWon thought maybe he should have at least left them with something, but then he shook his head. The belt around his waist, the high-grade inventory, had become heavy from all the items, yet YuWon was still uneasy. This might still not be enough. The place the servant guided him to was a cave halfway up Mount Heaven. The entrance was only 2 meters tall, but inside, there was a large, empty space. It was a training chamber filled with grain balls. We've arrived. The servant handed YuWon a torch drenched in oil. YuWon lit the torch and walked inside the training chamber. As he lit the lights around the chamber, the dark interior brightened up. It was a long cave. As he went deeper inside, he found that the training chamber was hundreds of meters in diameter. On one side, there was a pile of grain balls. While he was taking the space in, the entrance of the training chamber was sealed off. That entrance would likely not open for 3 months. The mechanism made it so it was only possible to close it from the outside and only be opened from the inside. So now, except for YuWon, no one could open that door. Without breaking it, that is. This was the perfect space to train without any interruptions. It's perfect for consuming the herbs. YuWon put his hand inside his inventory. From inside it, he managed to grab all the herbs he brought from the medical hall. There were loads and loads of medicinal herbs that gathered around YuWon in an instant, forming a mountain of herbs. YuWon chewed on the medicinal ingredients for a while. Various awful, bitter flavors enveloped his mouth. You consumed an antler herb. The tower was notified. Your resistance to poison increases slightly for 24 hours. You consumed a poisonous aster root. Your resistance to poison increases for 21 hours. You consumed a banchok flower. You have gained resistance to 98 types of poison for 46 hours. The tower kept on notifying as YuWon kept on consuming these herbs. Several messages popped out one after another. Almost vomiting a couple of times, YuWon stopped eating the medicinal ingredients. It's so gross. He thought maybe getting stabbed by swords while fighting would feel better. Never had YuWon imagined that there were so many different bitter flavors. And even though he had tried a wide variety of medicines in his life, he had never eaten this many at once. He thought maybe he should have brought some honey, but that would have only weakened the potency of the medicines. After eating them until his stomach was full, YuWon looked unsightly. His stomach now hurt from the effects of all the different medicinal ingredients. I think some of them got mixed into poison. Medicine was something that shouldn't have been consumed without the proper consultation from an apothecary. It can't be helped. It's not like I know what every medicine does. YuWon had asked the chief doctor about fatal combinations just in case. Thanks to that, YuWon was able to avoid consuming medicines that were potentially lethal together, though it was only a little bit. One of the medicines he had consumed had a toxic reaction. Luckily, all it did was cause a bit of a stomach ache. It's perfect for consuming this. YuWon put his hand inside his inventory. From inside it, he managed to grab a hard gem-like thing. It is the 8th heart of Orochi, which was separated after being sealed by Susanoo. It possesses a powerful poison. Due to the poison inside Orochi's heart, without some high-quality medicine, one couldn't even think about consuming it. That was how powerful the poison in the heart was. I was wondering where I could obtain antidotes to consume this thing. YuWon smiled while looking at his inventory full of medical ingredients. To think I'd end up getting them here. Just then, the tower notified YuWon, and Nameless Egg opened its mouth wide. Sensing the egg inside his inventory move, YuWon frowned. It was happening again. YuWon looked at the egg inside his inventory and spoke in an angry tone, "This one's off limits. If you try it again, I'm going to fry you up." Nameless Egg is scared shitless. The tower was notified. Nameless Egg falls back into slumber. The threat must have worked because it fell back asleep, giving up on Orochi's heart. This had already happened once before. While trying to figure out how to consume Orochi's heart, the egg had attempted to swallow it. Because he had properly scolded the egg back then, it didn't reveal its teeth instantly this time, but YuWon was still on high alert. That'll probably do it. YuWon carefully looked around his surroundings before going in for a bite. YuWon's teeth broke the hard heart. You consumed Orochi's 8th heart. The tower was notified. Orochi's poison spreads throughout your body. The inside of his mouth felt like it was burning, and in a hurry, YuWon chewed and swallowed. Your poison resistance tries to resist the status effect, poisoned. An endless stream of messages, and with it, you have failed to resist Orochi's poison. You are now afflicted by the status effect, poisoned. Your poison resistance increases by 1. YuWon arcane power kept on increasing rapidly under the huge impact of Orochi's heart. He tried to bear the pain of poison through sheer willpower. But, due to the impact of the poison, he coughed up a mouthful of blood several times. Orochi's poison spread through YuWon's entire body. He felt as if his skin and muscles were being scorched. YuWon barely managed to reach out his arms, grab the herbs, and eat them. YuWon couldn't remember how many times he had heard this message now. His poison resistance and arcane power had gone up dozens of times, to the point that most normal poisons would have no effect on him. However, even such a high poison resistance was futile against Orochi's poison. There was only a single effect. The pains lessened. The pain from the poison was decreasing very slightly. YuWon had to be satisfied with this. The higher his poison resistance increased, the slower the poison spread throughout his body while also strengthening the medicine's effects. YuWon, who had been flopped over and barely grabbing and eating the herbs, managed to turn his body over onto his back. His stomach still felt like it was engulfed in flames, but at least this was something. While chewing on a root he didn't know the name of, YuWon slowly opened his paralyzed eyes. His stats increased along with his poison resistance, and arcane power was starting to increase at a rapid rate. It's going up faster than I expected. YuWon's current arcane power was 88. How is this possible? Wait. YuWon remembered a skill he had forgotten. He quickly checked the skill, Master of Mana. At first, YuWon was confused about the effect he had never heard of before, but now he somewhat understood what it could mean. Mana will follow me by its own will. This is a new discovery. YuWon continuously felt mana fill his body. If I can get it to triple digits like this. YuWon grabbed a bigger handful of medicinal herbs. He shoved it in his mouth and started neutralizing the poison that had begun spreading inside his body again. This had now been going on for a few days. In order to neutralize all the poison and absorb all the mana inside Orochi's heart, YuWon would need more than just a few days. Even though blood dripped from his mouth because of the internal injuries caused by the poison, YuWon was still smiling. This is going to take quite a bit of time. The heavenly demonic cult had been frozen like the winter of the Northern Sea. It was an organization that had been in seclusion for a long time, located on the outskirts of the martial realm on the 10th floor of the Grand Tower. Within that cult, a small wind had started blowing. Jaryong had been coming here to look for YuWon after a few days, and a month had passed just like that. He spoke while staring at the training chamber. It's been a month now. He might be planning on staying inside for the full 3 months. I thought he would have at least come out in the middle to obtain a secret art, or something. Hamuk looked at the entrance of the training chamber YuWon had entered. A month had already passed by, and the only thing YuWon had taken with him was the medicinal ingredients he got from the medical house. Hamuk thought, there's no way a player that only just arrived on the 10th floor would pass on the opportunity to learn a secret art of the martial realm. He should at least know that, but they had naturally assumed that YuWon would come out sometime in the middle, but, as if he didn't need a break or any other preparations, YuWon hadn't emerged. And I'm not sensing any special traces of ki, thought Hammock. The Fist Lord's training was loud enough to shake the mountaintop. Meanwhile, YuWon hadn't let out a sound nor any trace that he was even alive. There was a stark contrast between the two. The Fist Lord entered seclusion training for 3 months. His goal is probably to resume training, which he hadn't been making much progress in, thought Hamuk. YuWon should have displayed an appropriate response, but to his dismay, YuWon was silent as the dead inside his training chamber. Hammock spoke, what training do you think he's doing? He's beyond quiet. Jaryong replied based on what he had heard through gossip, I'm wondering that too. I don't think he'd have spent the past month only meditating. I heard that he took all sorts of medicinal ingredients from the medical house. Wait, Hamuk interrupted Jaryong. Be quiet for just a second. He felt a presence inside the training chamber. YuWon, who had been still this entire time, was starting to move. The sound of his movements grew closer. Hamuk honed in on YuWon's steps and said, "He's coming out." The door of the training chamber opened. YuWon, who had exited the training chamber after almost a month, looked skinnier. His face was thinner, and his skin was a pale white from not having seen the sun in such a long time. What the? Has he been sick and not training? Hamuk and Jaryong's heads were filled with all different thoughts on YuWon. Are you guys here to welcome me? YuWon asked Hamuk and Jaryong, who had been waiting at the entrance of the training chamber. Despite his sickly appearance, YuWon was walking just fine. In fact, his gait looked even more stable than before. Hamuk didn't fail to notice this detail. Did he learn a stepping technique while he was inside? YuWon had gotten pretty close to him, and Hamuk responded while trying to hide what he had just thought. We just stopped by in passing. So, did you manage to make any progress while you were inside the... Hamuk suddenly shut his mouth mid-sentence. I'm hungry, YuWon said while rubbing his stomach. He had only seen bitter medicinal ingredients and antidotes for a month. Let's first grab some food. YuWon ate up his food like a savage. After tearing apart a chicken leg and shoving it in his mouth, he pointed at the vegetable stir-fry with his chopsticks before he was even done chewing. And at the same time, he looked around at the other foods on the table. Hamuk, who was dining on the opposite side of the table, stopped his hand and asked, "Did you starve yourself for a month or something?" There were grain balls inside the training chamber. Though they weren't delicious, one could satiate their hunger and get the necessary nutrition by eating them. I had planned on coming outside at least once so I wouldn't have any reason to eat those nasty things. After answering, YuWon continued to feast. To have actually starved himself for a month. Hamuk couldn't believe it. He then thought how technically YuWon hadn't been starving since his stomach was full of something, just not food. I can't believe he actually ate all those medicines, Hamuk thought. The scent of various medicinal ingredients still hadn't dissipated. Where did he use all those ingredients? He doesn't look injured. Was he poisoned or... Hamuk's train of thought came to a halt and his eyes widened. Poisoning. That would explain all this. Among elixirs there were a few that were hard to consume due to their strong poison. In those cases, the poison was often more powerful than its effect as an elixir, so it was more common to simply use them as poisons instead. But hypothetically speaking, what if someone could get an infinite amount of antidotes provided to them, regardless of how many points they were worth? That adds up. A poisonous elixir. But there was still a lingering question in his mind. How poisonous was the elixir? Hamuk had stopped caring about the meal. He was busy staring at YuWon, who had cleared almost all the food on the table, including his own. Then, as soon as the meal was over, "I'll be on my way then." With his stomach now full, YuWon got up without any hesitation. After just a single hearty meal, YuWon's pale and sickly appearance was nowhere to be seen. "Where are you headed? Back to the training cave?" Hamuk curiously asked YuWon. YuWon declined and said, "I'm headed to the martial arts library." Now that YuWon had finished his first order of business, it was time to prepare for his next course of action. Figures. As a player, training martial arts for 2 months is bound to be better than leveling up a couple of times, thought Hamuk. After asking the servant assigned to him, YuWon was guided to a large building with dozens of martial artists on guard. YuWon looked over at the man who was standing guard right in front of the library. He had the most normal-looking face, and he was wearing a plain outfit, but YuWon was sure that he was the one in charge here. The security is tight. YuWon closely observed the martial artists. They all seemed like players. YuWon guessed that he might have even been pretty close to being a ranker. No, there might even be a real ranker amongst them. They had placed one of the few rankers of the heavenly demonic cult here. I guess that's only natural. The martial arts library was the most important place of every martial school since the records saved inside were basically the roots and foundations of their schools. This means that it'll be impossible for me to view any information beyond what I'm permitted. Is this really necessary? Even without a guard, I wouldn't be able to see it anyway, YuWon asked, annoyed by the watch of the guards following him. The martial artist whom YuWon thought was a ranker answered, "It's a standard procedure. Please follow it." He was at least more respectful than Hamuk. After hearing his answer, YuWon stopped complaining. Since he was in the middle of taking the cult's test, he knew that they wouldn't interfere or butt in with what he was doing. After complying with the simple procedures, YuWon was able to step foot inside the library. The building had a high ceiling, and there were bookshelves stacked all the way up to it. Even YuWon couldn't help but voice his amazement. How many books could there be in here? Hundreds of thousands? It was simply one massive library. YuWon asked the lab attendant, "Am I permitted to read all the books here?" The attendant nodded and then said, "You are not allowed to go into the area connected by that door. Please keep that in mind, but feel free to browse any books inside here." After telling him that, the head guard stepped to the side of the room so as to not get in his way. YuWon was surprised by the fact that there was a dust-covered steel door that the head guard had pointed to. He was amazed that there were even more books. Does that mean that these are all just the low-rank martial arts? The heavenly demonic cult had a history of thousands of years. They existed even before entering the world of the tower, and they endlessly worked to create, invent, and advance martial arts. And this martial arts library was the essence of that very cult. It's even more impressive than I had imagined. YuWon had previously seen the martial arts library of various martial schools, like the Namgun clans. It's got to be at least 4 times larger than that of the Namgun clans. YuWon grabbed the first book that was within his reach and checked it out. The letters of the martial realm were automatically translated by the system. This must be a fist technique that's based on the 8 extreme fists. It's more complicated, which results in more destructive power, but at the cost of defense. Since he opened it, YuWon thought he might as well try it, mimicking the drawings in the book. Mimicking the forms didn't last very long. YuWon closed the book. I already knew this, but martial arts just don't suit me. After putting the book back in its place, YuWon started looking around the massive library. There were an endless number of books. It made YuWon wonder how he would ever manage to read through all of them. YuWon pondered, not only do I have to withstand 3 techniques from a ranker, but it'll be the Fist Lords, no less. The key things for clearing this test are the 3 months of time and the resources provided to the player. I need to find it within 1 month. And that's why YuWon came to the library to find it. YuWon started thoroughly searching the martial arts library. YuWon opened up a book, flipped through the first chapter, and put it back. There was no need to read it thoroughly. It has to be here. The roots of the Heavenly Demon Divine Cult. The origin of the martial arts of Heavenly Demon, Cheon Mujin mastered. The Heavenly Demon Spirits. YuWon kept on reading the martial arts manuals one after another to find this legendary technique. The Fist Lord was one of the leaders of the Heavenly Demonic Cult, not to mention a ranker. There had to be a clue somewhere in here on how to go up against Pung Beklim, and it was the technique Heavenly Demon Spirit. Half a month? A heavy voice resounded in a room somewhere in the demonic cult. Yes. Apparently, he's been browsing the martial arts library for that long. The library attendant came to report on YuWon. Mugwek put down his teacup after hearing the report from his subordinate. He had already heard that YuWon had exited the training chamber. He thought YuWon would just pick a few martial arts and go back into the training chamber, but for him to have holed up inside the library for half a month now. What is he doing in there? When I checked in on him, he appeared as if he was planning on skimming through every single book. The subordinate reported. All of them? Mugwek himself had been inside the martial arts library a few times. He'd even looked through a few martial arts books as well. To skim through all those books would be impossible to do in 3 years, let alone 3 months. Mugwek spoke his thoughts. First, he grabbed a mountain of medicinal ingredients from the medical house, and now this. He's just doing one weird thing after another. I personally don't think he's someone the Lords should be mindful of, sir," the subordinate replied. Of course, the subordinate thought that. It was natural for players who reached the martial realm on the 10th floor to learn and practice martial arts. Though it was a personal choice to really try and master it, YuWon's current actions seemed like a complete waste of time. Do you think his actions are weird? Mugwek looked at his reflection on the teacup. His thoughts and actions are entirely unpredictable. He had expected YuWon to train hard inside the training chamber for 3 months since there was really nothing else he could do. Yet YuWon's actions continued to defy his expectations. A faint smile appeared on Mugwek's face. The more he breaks my expectations, the more my hopes for him grow. After seeing YuWon up close, Mugwek had gotten a weird feeling. The power that he sensed from YuWon wasn't all that remarkable. However, I can see it in his eyes. It doesn't seem like he's aiming to become something great, he just already is. He's looking at a place much higher than here, said Mugwek. Another month went by. A total of 2 out of the 3 promised months had now passed. YuWon had only managed to skim through half of the books in the martial arts library by now. YuWon closed the book he was reading. The guards watching over YuWon expected him to put the book back in its place as he had been doing all this time. But this time, it was different. YuWon grabbed the book while mumbling to himself, "I found it." YuWon finally exited the martial arts library. And then, another month passed by. 1 month inside the training chamber. 1 month inside the martial arts library. And then another month inside the training chamber. After coming out of seclusion training, the First Lord was told the news after he spent a whole day resting. The heavenly demonic cult was disconnected from the outside world. Nothing of note really ever happened inside the cult, so the only interesting news was information regarding YuWon. Maybe I did all that for nothing. There was nothing special about the actions that YuWon had demonstrated for the past 3 months. He consumed elixirs and medicinal herbs, then trained for a month after selecting a martial art from the library. My seclusion training is going to go to waste. The Fist Lord donned his martial arts uniform and left his residence. The stage was going to be the martial arts training ground for sword practice, and the martial artists of the cult were already crowding around to watch. The audience that gathered in the training ground was full of excitement to watch the fight. The day of the fight had come and everyone started mumbling about what was going to happen. Is it starting soon? It's going to be a rare feast for the eyes. It's not every day one gets to see the skills of the Fist Lord. I heard that YuWon kid is pretty famous on the lower floors. It's not just the lower floors. I heard even the upper floors are in a riot with even the major guilds trying to get in contact with him. One of the guys kept on rambling, but upon watching the Fist Lord entering the arena, his colleagues shut him down, in order to avoid any consequences. After listening in on the crowd by increasing his hearing abilities, the Fist Lord let out a silent laugh. The subordinate that followed behind him remained as quiet as possible, watching his step because the Fist Lord was emanating so much fighting spirit. Everyone's full of expectation, said the Fist Lord. It was true. Everyone was indeed betting their hopes on YuWon. The Fist Lord found this all distasteful. No matter how great he may have been, how could a brat that just arrived on the 10th floor be a match against him? The Fist Lord finally arrived at the training grounds. The grounds were completely silent, despite the fact that it was crowded full of people with no room to move. The 1,000 martial artists of the heavenly demonic cult were all gathered here. They were all holding their breaths, waiting for the stage to be ready. He's here. The Fist Lord. Wow. Damn. This is my first time watching him in action. A bit of a clamor erupted at the appearance of the Fist Lord. The commotion made him furrow his brow. Their conversations were so flippant. He could see that the 1,000 people here were everyone in the heavenly demonic cult. The cult truly has become weaker, to think it's full of these sorts of people, said the Fist Lord. Due to the organization being cut off from the outside, the number of players that joined decreased, and naturally, the amount of people leaving increased. The Fist Lord was getting angry at the people babbling. He suddenly shouted using his internal energy, everyone's silence. It felt like a tiger's roar. Everyone felt shivers down their spine. The Fist Lord continued and spoke using internal energy. The fight we will have is no normal fight, but the heavenly demon's trial. Everyone should keep their manners. As the Fist Lord finished, the crowd went holding their breath to not let out even a single sound. The crowd split, and from within the crowd, a person walked into the training grounds. YuWon, who had just exited the training chamber, had arrived at the stage of the test. "What is with the atmosphere?" said YuWon. "You're late," said the Fist Lord. "I thought I got here just in time. Also, the main character is supposed to show up last." The promised time was noon. The sun was currently right above their heads, so it was true that he'd arrived just in time. YuWon put the sword on his waist into his inventory, and instead pulled out Edge of Nightfall. "Looks like the way you talked has not changed," said the Fist Lord. "That's a bizarre sword you have right there." After seeing that the stage was set, Moogwek stepped far away. The training ground was hundreds of meters wide. It was the perfect location for a fight. "Let's see how much progress you've made in 3 months." The Fist Lord started emanating a fighting aura, and with that, a message popped up for YuWon, the participant of the test. "The second trial will now begin." The test had now started. Watching the Fist Lord get into position, YuWon raised his sword. He was as tense as he could get. YuWon said, "You're going to regret it. Giving me 3 months." As soon as YuWon took his stance, another message popped up for him: "Please dodge or block 3 techniques from the Fist Lord Pung Beklim." The Fist Lord, Pung Beklim, charged toward YuWon, and strands of electric currents started generating from his fist. YuWon took his stance to face Beklim's fist head-on. Beklim started gathering energy in the fist. Even though the fist hadn't dropped yet, its energy was enough to destroy the surroundings. And yet this was only the first move. As YuWon noticed Beklim charging at him with huge energy emanating from his fists, there was an instinctive feeling deep down his heart. A spine-chilling, destructive fighting spirit. A bright light filled YuWon's eyes as he closed in. When the First Lord swung his fist down, a tornado of rubble shot up, creating a huge blast of thunder. It was the Heavenly Thunder technique. Everything where YuWon was standing was completely eradicated. YuWon looked at the spot where he had been standing just a second ago. With a flash of blue lightning and the force from the punch, an area dozens of meters wide had become a dugout pit. It would have been bad if I got caught up in that. A terrifyingly destructive technique. YuWon couldn't believe this was the first technique. Lightning mana was encircling the Fist Lord's fist. In the martial realm, they called it ki. So you dodged it. Good judgment. If you tried to block it instead of dodging it, you'd have been dead meat, said the Fist Lord. YuWon believed him. In fact, YuWon would have been lucky if there was even a piece of his flesh left. To be able to display this much power on the 10th floor, this is crazy, thought YuWon. This might have been a test, but for the penalty to be decreased to this extent on the 10th floor, YuWon couldn't help but think that the test's difficulty made no sense. 2 left. YuWon had managed to survive 5 bouts against Chris's, a ranker just like the Fist Lord. However, the penalty and the restriction of power were much stronger for Chris's, not to mention the fact that he was injured in his fight against Hephaestus. If you can, I'd like to see you try dodging it again, said the Fist Lord. Beklim took his stance to perform the second technique. Earlier, Beklim had swung his left fist. This time he swung his right fist, but very slowly. The speed at which the Fist Lord was extending his arm was almost enough to make YuWon yawn. However, it's accelerating, YuWon noticed. The slow-moving fist almost seemed like a lie as it started moving so fast that one almost couldn't see it anymore. It was the 100-step lightning fist technique. YuWon managed to dodge every fist of Fist Lord using the Cinder Eyes, battle prediction skill. He could see the paths of each fist strike. When YuWon dodged the final strike of Beklim, a huge amount of lightning currents went past YuWon. The earth shook. The area that this second punch destroyed was even larger than his first. It was as if thunder and lightning rained down from the skies. After having used his second technique, Beklim squinted his eyes. Once again, YuWon had moved ahead of time and escaped the range of his attack. This time it was much closer, but this was clearly something that wasn't possible just by being quick-footed. He moved before I even extended my fist, the Fist Lord thought. It felt as if YuWon was anticipating his movements. That was when YuWon's eyes changed to red. And it was no normal shade of red. Seeing how they changed suddenly, the Fist Lord could tell that this wasn't a normal phenomenon. It must be because of a skill, he thought. A skill that could read his attacks. He guessed that it must have been at least a rank skill because how else could he have avoided 2 of his punches? No wonder he was so confident, the Fist Lord remarked. Baeklim finally understood why YuWon had wanted to start the test right away. Baeklim let out a laugh. He scoffed. How absurd. His eyes flashed with lightning currents. The Fist Lord Baeklim backed off several meters away from YuWon. The martial arts world is so wide for you to just believe in one skill to fight with, said the Fist Lord. Fist Lord Baeklim raised his hand, and multiple electric currents gathered over his hand. Above Mount Heaven, dark stormy clouds started to form. The peak of empty heaven was above the clouds, so this was no natural phenomenon. From Baeklim's hand, blue lightning was gathering, and his surroundings were starting to spark. This time, as long as we are under the same sky, you can't avoid it. Baeklim spoke. Mugwek, who was watching over the fight, clicked his tongue. He could tell that the aftershocks of the attack were going to go beyond the training grounds. I'll have to do something about that, Mugwek said. Let me, the Spear Lord said while getting up from his seat. He started preparing so Baeklim's attack wouldn't have an effect outside the arena. YuWon noticed the movements from the Lords of Heavenly Cult. He was confused for a second. But he could also tell that this third technique was going to be completely different than the previous ones. I won't be able to dodge this, he thought. He guessed that the power of this attack would be less than the previous 2 because even Baeklim shouldn't be able to output enough power to completely annihilate this entire area. They might have been in the middle of a test, but as someone who wasn't even a high ranker, the Fist Lord shouldn't have permission to use that much power. So in exchange for having a wider range, the attack should be that much weaker. YuWon planted his 2 feet firmly into the ground. The power of the dark divine crystal traveled from his hand into his sword. On top of that, both his arms became strengthened by gigantification. YuWon clenched his sword with both hands. He enchanted the sword with the energy of the dark divine crystal, making the already black sword an even deeper shade of black. Seeing YuWon's actions brought a smile to Baeklim's face. So you plan on blocking it? That may be the right choice for you, he said. YuWon's instincts told him that this attack would be unavoidable. This time you met the wrong opponent, Kim YuWon, said the Fist Lord. He raised his right hand up in the sky, finally ready to unleash his skill. Baeklim thought that it would have been the right decision if he hadn't been facing him. The attack he was about to use could neither be dodged nor blocked. It was the third and final move. Baeklim's hand stroked down, bringing the thunder in the sky down. It was the technique, heaven-splitting thunder. The dark clouds parted and lightning and thunder rained down upon the arena where YuWon and the Fist Lord stood. Dense smoke filled the arena, mixed with kicked-up dirt and rubble. The electricity that didn't dissipate traveled along the smoke. The audience was speechless at the sight of the monstrous destructive force. I almost died. So this is a rancor. I can't believe it. The audience started mumbling in trembling voices. The people closest to the fight took a step back after seeing the scorched earth right in front of them. Had the Spear Lord not blocked the attack, they would have ended up getting caught in the Fist Lord's lightning strikes. So, what are the results? The dense smoke finally parted. A figure started appearing from the smoke. A message popped up. You blocked 3 techniques from the Fist Lord, Pung Baeklim. It was YuWon, who had appeared from the smoke. His hands were trembling due to the huge impact from heaven's thunder, and a lot of thunder was absorbed within his body. You have passed the second test of the heavenly demonic cult. YuWon rubbed the back of one of his hands. Because he blocked the attack head-on, the electricity that he wasn't able to stop or brush off ended up partially paralyzing him. So this is the power of combining martial arts and skills, YuWon thought. YuWon had only ever properly seen it a few times before. The techniques that Baeklim displayed were no ordinary techniques. He was a martial artist who was born inside the heavenly demonic cult, but like YuWon, he was a player and a ranker who climbed the tower. And the three techniques that he'd used were the result of harmonizing the skills he'd mastered. The second person to be visible was Baeklim. His smile and the expression of interest on his face was no longer there. In fact, it was plainly visible to everyone that he was in shock. "You blocked it," said Baeklim. He'd had a feeling that YuWon did, but it was now confirmed as YuWon was unveiled amidst the parting smoke. "I thought that you might be able to block it," Baeklim said while walking towards YuWon. He no longer saw meaning in using large techniques from a distance. "But I didn't expect you to come out this unscathed." The way Baeklim looked at YuWon changed. And the air around him started to change as well. He smirked while looking at YuWon. He did not expect a newbie to block all three techniques. Though it was faint, there was a sign of the penalty enacting itself. It meant that Baeklim was preparing to use his maximum power. "Do you want to continue?" Baeklim asked. A message pooped up. "Would you like to continue this test?" YuWon had cleared the test. If YuWon refused, Baeklim had no right to forcefully continue it, and he'd then face the full effect of the penalty every time he attacked YuWon, not to mention that he'd be going against the heavenly demon's will. However, YuWon was very much willing to agree with the Fist Lord's wishes. "Of course, that is what I wish for as well," YuWon said. YuWon had yet to put away his sword. Baeklim smashed his two fists together, scaring the audience with the resulting thunderous sound. "Let's keep playing. Now why don't you attack?" Baeklim trailed off. As he was about to let YuWon have the first move, his face, which had been full of excitement, soured. The electricity flowing around him started to waver. Baeklim could see a faint heat shimmering right before YuWon's eyes. It was some sort of physical manifestation of internal energy, no mana. Though it was half-baked, Baeklim could tell what it was right away. No, he could feel what it was. "You," Baeklim said, pointing towards YuWon, his hand wavering ever so slightly. "How are you able to use the heavenly demon spirit?" "It's a bit lacking to call it the heavenly demon spirit just yet," YuWon boldly responded. "This is still nothing more than the shape of its base form," YuWon said, looking at the heat shimmers that were forming around him. "This is merely a shell of the heavenly demon spirit, and an incomplete one at that." The heat shimmers moved in a way that seemed like they were protecting YuWon as if they actually had a will of their own. "Is that the real heavenly demon spirit? I heard he spent a whole month in the martial arts library. He must have obtained it there. This is just the second test, yet he's managed to get his hands on the heavenly demon spirit." The Sword Lord shivered, watching the energy radiating off of YuWon. He couldn't believe this was a player that had just now reached the 10th floor. The heavenly demon spirit is the root and foundation of the heavenly demonic cult. It's the materialization of the martial arts mastered by the heavenly demon, Cheon Mujin, the Sword Lord thought while looking at YuWon. Seeing this, Baeklim instinctively recoiled. The electricity weakening around Baeklim was a sign of him wavering. The Baeklim who looked like he was ready to punch YuWon at any moment suddenly seemed to have lost his morale. "Luckily it appears to be effective," thought YuWon. YuWon walked closer to Baeklim, while extracting as much power out of the dark divine crystal as possible. "I can only hold the heavenly demon spirit for 4 minutes at best. It looks like you have no plans on attacking me head-on, so I will go first," said YuWon while staring at Baeklim with his cinder eyes. YuWon could feel Baeklim's instinctive repulsion against the heavenly demon spirit, even if it was incomplete. He could feel Baeklim's energy wavering. If this was the real heavenly demon spirit, I would be able to make him obey me with just a single sentence, thought YuWon. As the fist and sword clashed, the blast wave and mana rippled out in all directions. The energy of the dark divine crystal fired out of YuWon's sword as he pushed away the Fist Lord. And in that short instance, they traded blows. A message popped up: "You blocked the Fist Lord Pung Baeklim's 47th technique." In a matter of seconds they have traded several blows. The Fist Lord Pung Beklim's fist was wavering. Currently, he was fighting YuWon with all he had. This was due to the faint energy of the heavenly demon spirit that was emanating from YuWon. But he could feel that the energy of heavenly demon spirit was fading as the fight progressed. So if he just holds on until then. Fight fairly, YuWon, shouted the Fist Lord. But I'm not doing anything underhanded, sir, replied YuWon. Everyone in the heavenly demonic cult had thought this was an impossible test, yet YuWon was still hanging on. Another attack was traded. YuWon winced at the pain in his wrists. It was truly an awe-inspiring brute force. Another message popped up: you blocked the Fist Lord Pung Beklim's 59th technique. The Fist Lord was flung back as far as YuWon was. He had become weaker due to the influence of the heavenly demon spirit, but as time went on, his attacks were intensifying. Is he getting used to it? Thought YuWon. However, if that was the only factor, it didn't explain how quickly the Fist Lord was becoming stronger. It's either that or my heavenly demon spirit is weakening. YuWon's thoughts were interrupted by Beklim. What a shame, it's been 59 moves. But it won't look like this any longer. Beklim gritted his teeth as the penalty increased. A spark flew off of the Fist Lord's body that wasn't from his attack. His blood had started splashing out from everywhere. The penalty, YuWon thought. YuWon could instinctively feel the next attack was going to be a big one. So he stopped himself mid-swing and tightly gripped his sword with both hands. On top of that, he activated gigantification and maximized the power output of the dark divine crystal. The sword rang from the heavy impact. YuWon's wrists ached again. Had he been using an ordinary sword, it would have been shattered into pieces. I should thank Odyssey, YuWon thought. At the same time, 3 mana blasts appeared around YuWon and the Fist Lord. The Fist Lord had known that YuWon was preparing a mana blast, yet he still ran at him, not caring about it. Fire rained down upon the Fist Lord. YuWon widened the gap between them by a few steps. The Fist Lord's body was very lightly scorched. You're really sturdy, remarked YuWon. Be proud of the fact that you even managed to hurt me this much, the Fist Lord snapped back. With just a swing of his hand, he blew away the fire YuWon started with the mana blasts. It was clear that he wasn't a ranker just for show. The mana blasts blew the arena even more. There were clouds of dust everywhere. Unless the Fist Lord excessively exerted his power and got greatly impacted by the penalty, it wasn't possible for YuWon to do proper damage against him by just using mana. If only the heavenly demon spirit was slightly more complete. YuWon shook his head. The Fist Lord patted down his clothes, more bothered that his martial arts uniform was scorched over his actual body. I can't believe this, the Fist Lord spoke in a baffled tone. For me, Pung Beklim, to be unable to defeat a greenhorn that just arrived on the 10th floor. His words came from a place of pride over his skills, but anyone would have felt that way if they were in his shoes. In a fight between a newbie and a ranker, the result was obvious. That was why this test had the hidden piece, the heavenly demon spirit, as well as a limit of 3 techniques. Despite that, this kind of put a dent in my self-esteem, the Fist Lord said while laughing out loud. Unlike earlier, this was a genuine laugh. The Fist Lord again gathered energy in his arm and swung it. YuWon got into a stance. He didn't have any more time to play around. The heavenly demon spirit must be running out, seeing as how you're rushing, the Fist Lord said. Come at me with all you've got, said the Fist Lord. Fortunately for YuWon, the Fist Lord's personality worked in his favor. He was a man that didn't know how to dodge. This was the reason why YuWon had picked the Fist Lord over the long-reaching spear or the pretty standard sword and Dao Lords. The Fist Lord wanted to defeat YuWon before his heavenly demon spirit ended. He thought that would be the only way to recover at least a little bit of his pride. The Fist Lord jumped. YuWon in turn moved like a dancer. I don't know where you learned such a thing, but that is also excellent. The Fist Lord shouted while throwing out punches to break through YuWon's defenses. YuWon was at his limits. It's over, he thought. The shape of the heavenly demon spirit behind YuWon disappeared. And at the same time, the force behind the Fist Lord's punch changed. It was an impact that felt like it could instantly snap his sword in half. YuWon's body was pushed far back. Another message popped up: you blocked the Fist Lord Pung Beklim's 89th technique. The Fist Lord must have noticed the disappearance of the awkward feeling. He stopped for a second, opening and closing his fist, measuring his strength. Then suddenly, the only thing YuWon could see was the punch coming towards him. He swung his sword, cutting right between his face and the Fist Lord's fist. Soon after, a smile came to his face. Finally, things get to be fun, said the Fist Lord. YuWon flew back a distance of 10 steps. For a second, he felt his body leave the ground. But it's not fun for me anymore, replied YuWon. This is just the beginning, so you should not say such weak things, said Beklim. He started throwing punches at YuWon. It was getting hard for YuWon. Are you only going to dodge now? Said the Fist Lord. He looked like he didn't care either way. To begin with, it was nonsensical that YuWon was fighting him toe-to-toe. And now that the heavenly demon spirit had worn off, the Fist Lord was confident that YuWon was no longer going to fight him head-on. Alright. Fine. Let's see how long you can keep this up. Accepting the penalty, the Fist Lord continued to gather his ki. Large sparks flew around his hands while the martial arts training ground started to become filled with his electric ki. YuWon noticed a clear difference. It was evident to him how much the Fist Lord had been bothered by the heavenly demon spirit. He's like a completely different person, he thought. YuWon had to make a decision, stat. A full frontal fight was no longer an option. YuWon focused on maximizing the power of Cinder Eyes. He could see it. The Fist Lord's punch headed straight at him. YuWon dodged the punch and tried to swing back, but I don't have enough time, he thought. He saw a punch coming in from the left. These movements were much more rapid than earlier. YuWon felt a chill down his entire spine. He knew that if he took even a single hit, it would be bad. Just 2 hits. That's all it would take for YuWon to be pummeled completely. And that's only if I managed to block it using gigantification. The Fist Lord could feel it. This was a short yet much longer duel than he had originally anticipated. But all things must come to an end. Alright, the Fist Lord said. Let's end this. To that end, the Fist Lord shot out a single punch. YuWon used gigantification. YuWon extended his arm. The Fist Lord's eyes widened while watching YuWon's hand come at him. What the? The force of the Fist Lord's fist got absorbed by YuWon's palm. Planting both of his legs firmly into the ground, YuWon managed to stop the Fist Lord's punch with his hand. A huge shockwave was created due to their clash. The Fist Lord heard YuWon's wrist snap, but that was all he managed to do to YuWon. For a second, his face turned white. For YuWon to actually stop him. At this distance, the Fist Lord thought. With this unexpected situation, the Fist Lord's judgment slowed down. YuWon normally held his sword with his right hand, but now YuWon's right hand was holding the Fist Lord's fist. That meant YuWon's sword right now was. The energy of the dark divine crystal went from his right hand through his body into his left hand. On reflex, the Fist Lord followed the path of the energy with his eyes. While holding on tightly to the Fist Lord's fist, YuWon slashed his chest. Blood spilled out from the cut. The wound wasn't that deep, but it was enough to drench the Fist Lord's hand when he touched the wound. With no longer enough strength to hold onto the Fist Lord's hand, YuWon let go of him. YuWon's right arm, which had taken a direct blow from a punch he threw while accepting the penalty, was limp and broken. For having been a direct cut, there wasn't that much blood. But the problem was that he had actually been inflicted with a wound. The Fist Lord took a few steps back, looking at the blood in the palm of his hand. The Fist Lord couldn't believe he let a 10th floor player draw blood. No, maybe the problem was that I gave him an opening to attack my chest. Did I lose? The Fist Lord said. He was absolutely stumped, lowering both fists. It was obvious the Fist Lord would be the victor if they continued to fight like this. However, this seems to be my loss, the Fist Lord said. The Fist Lord put up both his hands to signify defeat before putting them down. This meant that A message popped up. The Fist Lord, Pung Beklim, signals his defeat. Is this for real? Did the Fist Lord actually lose? Are we sure he didn't go easy on him? Everyone present in the arena was astonished by the results. They went on and on about the fight between YuWon and the Fist Lord. A miracle had happened. The second test of the heavenly demonic cult ended. The Sword Lord, while looking at YuWon, thought, yes, it is exactly a miracle. Now he completely believes in Kim YuWon. This is beyond what is allowed in the rules. The Dao and Spear Lords tried to stop the Fist Lord, but the Sword Lord held them back. Let's just watch. Even the heavenly demon is simply spectating. With that, the Dao Lord and the Spear Lord finally noticed Jeon Mujin, the heavenly demon, watching the fight from the sidelines. The heavenly demon who watched the whole match left after YuWon won the match. A message popped up. You have perfectly cleared the second test of the heavenly demonic cult. YuWon was totally beaten down, without an ounce of energy left within his body. He let out a sigh just as the message popped up. You have obtained the heavenly demon spirit. Later that day, the four lords gathered together to have a discussion about YuWon. Is it alright to just let it be? Said the Spear Lord. Both you and I went to the library to attain the heavenly demon spirit, but... The Spear Lord continued but got interrupted by the Sword Lord as he said, it's fine. If it was that easy, it would have been found long ago, the Sword Lord said while stroking his beard, watching the martial artist heading to the library. There was a reason why such a great technique was inside the low-rank martial arts portion of the library. The heavenly demon spirit was actually not that different from your standard breathing and cultivation technique. It was nothing more than a breathing technique that allowed one to accept energy, and it was incredibly hard to discern that it was the heavenly demon spirit just by reading it. Not to mention, mastering it is a whole other story, the Sword Lord thought. The Sword Lord thought, from the perspective of the cult, we can no longer just leave the heavenly demon spirit there. Even if it was just a shell of the technique, the heavenly demon spirit was still a symbol of the heavenly demonic cult. So he was thinking about counterattacking that entire time. The Fist Lord mumbled while opening and closing his hands, recapping the fight in his mind. The Sword Lord's eyes darted over to the Fist Lord, who was mumbling while staring down at his palm. Fist Lord, Mugwek said, walking over to Beklim, who was still standing at the center of the training ground. Don't be too embarrassed about this. No one could have foreseen him having learned the heavenly demon spirit. The Sword Lord said that to console him, but the Fist Lord had an unexpected reaction. Embarrassed? The Fist Lord said with an oddly proud look on his face. Then the Fist Lord started laughing proudly. After seeing the Fist Lord's expression, the Sword Lord was reminded how much the Fist Lord enjoyed fighting, and he realized how much this fight might actually have been stimulating and enjoyable for him. He's going to become a high ranker one day, the Fist Lord declared. And he's probably going to surpass our leader. After a moment of silence, the Sword Lord nodded his head. He couldn't deny it. It's honestly an honor, having gotten to have such a fun fight against a guy like that. Hearing the Fist Lord's response, the Sword Lord understood his feeling. The Sword Lord thought while looking at the empty spot where the heavenly demon had stood. Soon the Lord will go find him. There was only a single test left, and that test was probably going to be conducted by the heavenly demon himself. YuWon received treatment at the medical house. He only needed to receive treatment for his right arm. While blocking the Fist Lord's final punch, a few of the broken bones had pierced through the skin. It really sucks not having hit triple digits with my arcane power. His magic power has reached 98. Just 2. If he had only managed to raise this stat twice more, he would have hit triple digits. Once you reached 100 with this stat, you were able to feel much more clearly the impact of each stat. While lying down, he recapped his fight against the Fist Lord. It was shallow. The sensation of his left hand cutting into the Fist Lord's chest. YuWon predominantly used his right hand. Due to that, there would have been an inevitable difference in power. However, the reason the cut was shallow wasn't just due to the difference between his right and left hands. In order to leave a dent on a ranker's body, you needed something extra. Had YuWon had 100 arcane power, he would have been able to leave a much deeper wound on the Fist Lord's chest. YuWon knew that it would take about 2 days for his arm to heal without any proper medicine, as the doctor told him. But for broken bones and torn flesh, it would be a pretty fast recovery. He remembered when he got scolded by the chief doctor for getting these injuries and for not having even a simple herb for treatment. YuWon checked his newly obtained skill, the Heavenly Demon Spirit. It is a skill created by the Lord of the Heavenly Demonic Cult, Cheon Mujin. It is an exclusive martial art of the school. It holds dominance over lower-ranked martial arts. By dividing your spirit, you are able to create a clone. The power of the Heavenly Demon Spirit is dependent on how much mana you imbue into the clone. A minus rank. It was definitely a good skill. A rank was enough for most rankers to desire it. So this is the skill I obtained at the midpoint. Thinking about the difficulty of the test, it was a lackluster reward, but YuWon didn't think of it like that. It was likely that the Heavenly Demon mastered this skill, reaching 100% proficiency with it. The Heavenly Demon Spirit was definitely a great skill, but the test isn't over yet. And right on cue. Kim YuWon-nim? An attendant came to YuWon, who was resting in his lodgings. The Heavenly Demon is calling for you, he said. Guided by the attendant, YuWon was led to the deepest part of the cult. The Heavenly Demon YuWon remembered was someone who didn't care for formalities and disliked complicated things. Due to that, his residence looked no different than the other houses in the cult. The Lord's Manor of the Heavenly Demonic Cult. Right at the entrance, the attendant took a step back. He has ordered that only a single person come in, the attendant said. Of course, that single person meant YuWon. He left the attendant, who stayed behind, and stepped over the threshold. Surprisingly, inside the manor, he couldn't sense anyone's presence. YuWon didn't think that the Heavenly Demon would leave the place after calling him here. He's as sluggish as always. With YuWon's current skills, it was impossible for him to sense the presence of a high ranker like the Heavenly Demon. YuWon walked slowly through the Lord's Manor, sightseeing. Nameless egg bears its fangs. The tower was notified. YuWon paused for a moment and turned to look the other way. He internally asked the egg, "Is it here?" What was waiting for YuWon there was the Heavenly Demon, who he had caught a quick glimpse of after he passed the first test. "So you're here," the Heavenly Demon Cheon Mujin said while opening his eyes. YuWon slightly bowed his head towards him. Cheon Mujin, the Heavenly Demon. He was a living piece of history of the martial realm. After attaining the position of a high ranker through personal strength and the power of the Heavenly Demonic Cult, he became a recluse in empty heaven, stopping all external activities. The only thing he did was oversee the tests, but as not a single person had passed the test, some even speculated that he might have died. "I heard you called for me," YuWon said while looking straight at Mujin. Mujin had a tall figure, towering over 2 meters. His shoulders were wide, and he was wearing a bright red dragon robe that covered his entire body. Despite sitting down, his eyes were almost level with YuWon's, so YuWon waited for him to speak without sitting down. "Is your arm okay?" YuWon responded to Mujin's question while shaking his arm, "As you can see." Suddenly a message popped up. The Moonlight Sword activates its effects. YuWon's sword, Edge of Nightfall, was a sword that really shone in darkness. Its effect of accelerating health and mana recovery allowed YuWon to start healing quicker once it had become night. Under the influence of night, your health regeneration speed increases. Stamina regeneration speed, plus 102%. The Heavenly Demon Cheon Mujin's attention shifted towards the Moonlight Sword. "That's a good sword. It makes me want it." Despite being unmaterialistic for the most part, Mujin was quite greedy when it came to swords. Due to that, for a while, there was even a rumor that the Heavenly Demonic Cult's vault actually stored many of the weapons that had disappeared from the tower. "I'm sure it's not as good as the sword you own, sir. This is off limits. There's an Odyssey that'd chew me out for failing to maintain my own weapon," said YuWon. Mujin spoke while staring at YuWon. "Are you talking about Hephaestus? He certainly has the right to do that." "You know Odyssey?" said YuWon. "I don't, but I have had the opportunity to wield the few swords that he's made. Mujin's greed for swords was greater than expected. Let's end the chit-chat here, Mujin said while getting up from his seat. V. With his over 2-meter tall stature, YuWon almost felt like he was face to face with a giant. Let's start the final test right away, Mujin continued. It was an unexpected response. YuWon said while shaking his broken arm, my arm's still like this. Didn't you say you were okay? Sighed Mujin. I meant that it was okay for me to move. I'm still in no condition to fight, YuWon rebutted. If possible, YuWon wanted to take the test while he was at his peak condition. It doesn't matter, Mujin said while quickly turning around and walking away. You won't have to use that arm anyway. Mujin headed over to an empty wall with nothing. Confused by Mujin's claim that he wouldn't need his arm, YuWon wondered why Mujin had walked towards the wall. That was when, with a small shimmer, Mujin disappeared. Is it a barrier? YuWon wondered. YuWon quickly used Cinder Eyes to investigate the spot where Mujin disappeared. His hunch was right. Where Mujin had been, there was a small trace of a barrier. What are you doing? Why aren't you entering? It was Mujin's voice. This is different from the one that's at the bottom of empty heaven. It's much more precise and complicated. Pressed by the heavenly demon, YuWon carefully walked into the barrier. A message popped up. Cinder Eyes tries to resist the Requiem barrier. Fortunately, the first step wasn't hard to take, revealing a large open area where he thought a wall existed. A noise rang inside his ears, and for a second his head became dizzy. Another message came ringing. Cinder Eyes fails to resist the Requiem barrier. A barrier so powerful that Cinder Eyes couldn't resist it. I can't break through this. If he lost his focus for even a second, he'd fall prey to the illusion of the barrier. That was when a big hand grabbed his shoulder and yanked him inside. YuWon could not understand what was happening. He could only be helplessly dragged inside the barrier. What do you guys think will happen to YuWon? Will he be able to uncover the demon cult's secret and clear all of its trials as well? That's all for today. If you like the next part of this manhwa, just comment below. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment to get epic content on this channel. See you next time.